Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Well, today we're tackling something you might not have heard of before, leptospirosis.
Yeah.
And we're using the World Health Organization's latest resource package on it.
Great source.
So we got the most up-to-date info.
Awesome.
Get ready for some surprising facts about this disease.
Okay.
It's more common than you might think.
It really is.
And there's one symptom in particular that's like a flashing red light.
Oh,
But we'll get to that later.
looking forward to it.
What's mind-blowing to me is that
Yeah.
leptospirosis is a global health concern.
It is a global health concern.
Affecting every continent.
That's right. Every continent.
The WHO estimates over 1 million cases each year
Over 1 million cases.
and nearly 60,000 deaths.
Nearly 60,000 deaths annually.
Wow.
To put that in perspective,
Yeah.
we measure the burden of disease in something called disability-adjusted life years,
Okay.
or dailies,
Dailies?
and a whopping 2.9 million are lost each year because of leptospirosis. That's a huge number.
Yes.
Okay, so before we get too deep,
Yeah.
let's start with the basics.
Sure.
What exactly is leptospirosis?
So leptospirosis is a zoonotic disease,
Meaning,
meaning that it can spread from animals to humans.
okay, so animals are involved somehow.
Here you are.
And the culprit is a tiny spiral-shaped bacteria
That's right.
called Leptospira.
Leptospira, yeah.
A bacteria, huh? I bet there's a story there.
There is.
Yeah.
The severe form was first described back in 1886
Wow, it's a long time ago.
by Adolf Weil.
Adolf Weil.
Hence the name Weil's disease.
Okay, Weil's disease.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
In 1907, a scientist named Stimson was examining a patient's kidneys, and he found clumps of bacteria shaped like hooks.
Hooks?
Yeah, little hooks.
So they saw that under a microscope.
Under a microscope, yeah.
Wow.
Like a microscopic mystery.
It's a little creepy.
Yeah.
And so these hooked bacteria were eventually identified as Leptospira.
As leptospirosis.
Okay, I'm picturing these tiny hooks swimming around.
Yeah.
It's kind of creepy, but also pretty cool.
It is cool.
So how did we go from hooked bacteria to a global health threat?
Well, it's all about transmission.
Okay.
Leptospirosis was initially thought to be an occupational hazard, mainly for cane farmers.
Cane farmers.
Yeah, cane farmers.
Interesting.
But as scientists dug deeper, they discovered that rodents, especially rats, play a huge role.
Rats, really?
Especially rats, yeah.
Okay.
They carry the Leptospira bacteria
Uh-huh.
and shed it in their urine,
So they're pee.
their pee, yep,
Okay.
which then contaminates water and soil.
Ah, so that's why we hear about leptospirosis outbreaks after floods.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's zoom in on Leptospira itself for a second.
Okay.
What makes this bacteria so unique besides the hooks and the spiral shape?
Well, Leptospira has these special flagella.
Flagella, so what do those do?
That let it move with incredible agility,
Oh, really?
even in thick mud.
Ah.
Think of them as tiny outboard motors,
Outboard motors.
propelling the bacteria through all sorts of challenging environments.
That's pretty impressive for something so small.
It is.
So we've got these supermobile bacteria hanging out in contaminated water and soil.
Right.
How does that translate to human infection?
It's all about contact.
Contact.
Yes.
Okay.
The most common way is through contact with that contaminated water or soil.
Okay.
Imagine you have a tiny cut on your foot and you're walking through a puddle after a rainstorm.
Oh, yeah.
That's all it takes.
For Leptospira to get in.
To sneak in, yes.
Wow.
It can also enter through your eyes, nose, or mouth.
Oh, wow. So it's not just cuts?
No.
Okay, so this isn't just about avoiding swimming holes.
Wow.
It's about being aware of everyday exposure.
Yes, exactly.
And what happens once this sneaky bacteria gets inside?
Well, the tricky thing is that the early symptoms of leptospirosis can mimic other illnesses,
Like Easton.
like the flu.
Yeah.
You might get fever, chills, headache, muscle aches.
So it's easy to brush it off as something else.
It is.
Is there any telltale sign that can help us differentiate leptospirosis from, say, a bad cold?
There is.
What is it?
If you see red eyes without pus,
Okay.
that's a big red flag.
Red eyes, but no pus.
Right.
Interesting.
It's called conjunctival suffusion,
Conjunctival suffusion.
and it can be a key sign of leptospirosis.
So red eyes, no pus.
That's something you'll want to remember.
Okay, got it.
Good.
But let's say someone misses that clue and the infection progresses.
Right.
What happens then? Does it always stay mild, or can things take a turn for the worse?
Some cases resolve on their own.
Okay.
but others can escalate.
Escalate.
Yes, to a severe form called Weil's disease.
We mentioned that earlier.
We did.
Okay, so this Weil's disease,
Yeah,
that's when multiple organs can be affected.
that's right. The liver,
Really?
kidneys, lungs, even the brain.
Wow, multi-organ dysfunction.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It can be.
What are the consequences of Weil's disease?
Oh, it can be life-threatening,
Oh, wow.
and it often develops rapidly.
That's scary.
We were talking about complications like jaundice, acute kidney injury,
Oh, no.
and even a condition where you start coughing up blood.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is a serious condition.
Given how serious this can get,
Yeah.
how do doctors even know they're dealing with leptospirosis?
Right.
Especially with those misleading early symptoms.
It can be tricky.
Yeah.
Diagnosing leptospirosis can be tricky
Okay.
because it often masquerades as other diseases.
What we said.
We did.
Okay.
But there are a few tools in the doctor's detective kit.
I like that, the detective kit.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
A blood test called ELISA
Elisa.
can detect antibodies to leptospira.
Antibodies.
Yes.
Okay.
It's quick,
Good.
but it doesn't always pinpoint the specific strain causing the infection.
So useful, but not a slam dunk. Is there a more precise way to identify the culprit?
There is what's called the gold standard,
The gold standard.
which is the microscopic agglutination test, or AMP.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is AMAT.
Okay.
It uses live Leptospira.
Live.
Yes, to detect specific antibodies in the blood.
Okay.
So it's highly accurate.
Sounds good.
But it requires specialized labs,
Uh-huh.
which means waiting longer for results.
So a trade-off between speed and precision.
Exactly.
But let's say we've got a confirmed diagnosis.
Okay.
What happens then?
Well,
Yeah.
how do you fight back against this microscopic invader?
How do you, yeah.
The good news
That's
is,
news.
yes,
Okay.
most cases can be treated effectively with antibiotics,
Antibiotics.
especially if caught early.
That seems important.
It is.
Okay.
Benzylpenicillin is often the go-to,
Benzylpenicillin.
but doxycycline is another option.
Doxycycline.
The key is to start treatment as soon as possible to prevent those serious complications.
So early intervention is key.
Yes,
That seems to be a theme with leptospirosis.
it is.
But before we get too deep into treatment,
Right.
let's talk prevention.
Sure.
What can people do to protect themselves from getting infected in the first place?
Well, avoiding contact with contaminated water and soil is paramount.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be extra cautious during floods or heavy rains,
Okay.
especially in areas known to have rodent populations.
Those rats again?
Yes.
Okay.
Protective gear like boots and gloves
Yeah.
can be lifesavers.
Especially for people who work outside, maybe?
Yes, for those working in high-risk environments.
Okay.
And, of course, good hygiene is essential.
Of course.
Washing your hands thoroughly,
Uh-huh.
keeping cuts and abrasions clean.
Got it.
All those things can significantly reduce the risk of infection.
So a mix of common sense, caution,
Yeah.
and respecting those sneaky leptospira.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
But we've talked a lot about rodents. What about other animals? Can they get leptospirosis too?
Absolutely.
They can.
Yes.
Wow.
A wide range of animals can be infected, including pets like dogs and cats,
Okay.
and farm animals like cattle and pigs.
So it's not just a human health issue.
It's not.
It's a whole ecosystem problem.
It is.
And I imagine controlling its spread gets even more challenging when animals are involved.
It does.
What can we do?
Well, controlling leptospirosis requires a multifaceted approach.
I see.
We've touched on personal precautions,
Uh-huh.
environmental management,
Okay.
but vaccinating animals is another crucial piece of the puzzle.
Vaccinating animals.
Yes.
Okay.
While vaccines don't offer complete protection,
Okay.
they can significantly reduce the severity of the disease
That's good.
and the risk of transmission.
So a three-pronged attack:
You could say that.
prevention, vaccination, and early treatment.
It's right.
But let's zoom out for a second
Okay.
and consider the bigger picture. We mentioned the global impact.
Yeah.
But what about the economic burden?
That's a good point.
This must have significant consequences for healthcare systems
It does.
and communities worldwide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're spot on.
Mm.
The economic toll of leptospirosis is enormous.
Wow.
In 2019 alone,
Yeah.
the global cost was estimated at a staggering $29.3 billion.
Billion.
Billion, yes.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is.
Okay.
Mainly due to lost productivity.
People can't work.
That's right.
Okay.
And those figures are likely conservative.
Many.
probably even more.
Wow.
Countries like China and India,
Okay.
where the disease is particularly prevalent,
Okay.
they're a significant portion of that burden.
Wow. Those numbers are eye-opening.
They are.
It really underscores the importance of investing
Yes.
in research, prevention, and control efforts.
It does.
But speaking of research, are there any promising developments on the horizon?
There's always active research.
Good.
Scientists are making strides.
What kind of strides?
Imagine more effective vaccines
Right.
that target a wider range of Leptospirosis strains.
That'd be great.
New diagnostic tools
Uh-huh.
that can provide faster and more accurate results.
Those would be good too.
And a deeper understanding of the bacteria itself, its life cycle,
Okay.
and how it interacts with different hosts.
All important stuff.
Yes.
All of this is crucial for developing more effective strategies
Absolutely.
to combat this global threat.
Right.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
Innovation and collaboration seem key here.
They are.
But for now, let's bring it back to you.
Sure.
What are the most important things to remember from our deep dive so far?
Okay, here's what you need to know.
Okay.
Leptospirosis is a serious zoonotic disease
Mm-hmm.
that's more common than you might think.
Right.
It's often misdiagnosed.
We've talked about that.
We have.
Okay.
Because its symptoms mimic other illnesses.
Yeah.
So be aware of the risk factors,
Okay.
especially if you live in an area where it's prevalent.
Good point.
Remember that telltale sign we talked about? Red eyes without pus.
Red eyes without pus, I remember.
That's good.
Okay.
That could be your clue.
Right.
Early treatment with antibiotics is essential
Okay.
for preventing severe complications like Weil's disease.
Got it.
And there are simple steps you can take to protect yourself.
Well,
Avoid contact with contaminated water and soil.
okay.
Wear protective gear when needed.
Okay.
And maintain good hygiene.
Sounds good.
Simple steps.
Excellent advice.
Thank you.
Leptospirosis may be sneaky, but knowledge is power.
It is.
And now you're armed with the facts.
That's right.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Right.
I want to leave you with something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned that leptospirosis thrives in warm, humid environments
Uh-huh.
and is often linked to heavy rainfall and flooding.
That's right.
So here's the question.
Okay.
If climate change continues to fuel more extreme weather events,
Yeah.
how might that impact the spread of this disease in the future?
That's a good question.
We'll explore this further in our next segment.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
Will do. Yeah, it's a really critical question.
It is.
And one that ties directly into what we've been discussing, about how leptospirosis spreads.
Right.
Those heavy rains.
Yeah.
And floods create ideal conditions for this bacteria to thrive.
They do?
They contaminate water sources and increase the risk of exposure.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Think about it.
Okay.
If extreme weather events become more frequent due to climate change,
Right.
the potential for outbreaks could really skyrocket.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
It is.
And with more people potentially displaced coming
Yeah.
into contact with contaminated water,
Right.
it's not a good picture.
No, it's not.
We've talked a lot about how leptospirosis affects humans,
We have.
but you mentioned animals can get infected too.
They can.
So let's dive into that a bit more.
Okay.
What are some common symptoms we might see in animals?
Well, the signs can vary
Okay.
quite a bit depending on the animal
Right.
and the specific strain of Leptospira
Uh-huh.
involved.
Okay.
But there are some general things to watch for.
Okay, like,
Fever,
okay.
loss of appetite,
Uh-huh.
lethargy,
Okay.
and jaundice.
And jaundice.
Yes.
That yellow and
That yellowish discoloration.
right, of the skin and eyes.
The skin and eyes, yeah.
So some overlap with human symptoms.
There is some overlap.
Makes sense since it's the same bacteria causing the trouble.
Exactly.
Are there any animal-specific symptoms that really stand out?
In cattle,
Okay.
a sudden drop in milk production can be a big red flag.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is.
For farmers.
Yeah, they might also experience abortions
Oh, wow.
or give birth to weak calves.
So that's really serious.
It's very serious.
Dogs, on the other hand,
Yeah.
might show signs like
Vomiting,
vomiting.
diarrhea,
Okay.
and even kidney failure in severe cases.
Oh, wow. That's heartbreaking to hear.
It is.
It sounds like leptospirosis can have some pretty serious consequences
Yeah.
for our animal companions
It can,
as well.
for sure.
It must be a huge concern for livestock farmers
It is.
and pet owners.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Leptospirosis outbreaks can be Devastating for farms
I can imagine.
and animal populations.
That's why veterinarians often recommend vaccinating animals,
They do.
especially in areas where leptospirosis is prevalent.
That's great.
Vaccination seems to be a recurring theme in our deep dive today.
It is an important tool.
Speaking of outbreaks, how is leptospirosis monitored and tracked on a larger scale?
Well, there are a number of surveillance systems in place globally.
Okay.
Here in India, for example,
Okay.
we have the Integrated Disease Surveillance Program,
Okay.
or IDSP.
IDSP?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a comprehensive system that plays a crucial role in tracking various diseases,
Okay.
including leptospirosis.
So it's like an early warning system for infectious diseases.
That's a good way to put it.
So how does this early warning system work in practice? What happens when a potential outbreak is detected?
Well, it's a multi-tiered approach.
I see.
Healthcare workers on the ground
Okay.
are trained to recognize
Okay.
and report suspected cases.
Makes sense.
Those reports are then sent to district and state health officials
Okay.
who analyze the data
Uh-huh.
and look for any unusual patterns.
So they're looking for spikes in the data.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if an outbreak is suspected,
Yeah.
rapid response teams are mobilized to investigate.
They get sent in.
Yes.
Okay.
And implement control measures.
It sounds like a well-coordinated effort
It is.
involving healthcare workers, epidemiologists, and public health officials.
All those people are involved.
But what do these control measures actually entail? What steps are taken to contain an outbreak?
Well, the specific actions taken really depend on the circumstances
Okay.
of the outbreak.
Oh.
But some common interventions include isolating infected individuals,
Okay.
treating them with antibiotics,
Uh-huh.
and implementing public health campaigns to raise awareness about the disease.
So a combination of treatment, prevention, and education.
That's right.
And I'm guessing environmental management plays a key role as well,
It does.
especially given the link to contaminated water.
Absolutely.
How do they do that?
Well, during outbreaks,
Yeah.
it's crucial to identify and decontaminate any water sources
Okay.
that could be harboring the bacteria.
Makes sense.
This might involve chlorinating water supplies,
Oh, okay.
improving sanitation systems,
Mm-hmm.
and even controlling rodent populations.
Rodent control, that's something we haven't talked much about yet.
Yeah.
What strategies are effective in reducing those populations and minimizing the risk of transmission?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay.
The best strategies really depend on the specific environment
Right.
and the types of rodents involved.
Okay, so what are some examples?
Some common methods include trapping, poisoning,
Okay.
and eliminating potential food sources in nesting sites.
So you got to make it inhospitable for them.
Yeah, it often requires a combination of approaches to be effective.
It seems like a multi-pronged approach is needed on many fronts when it comes to leptospirosis.
It does.
But it sounds like controlling rodents is just one piece of a much larger puzzle in preventing this disease.
You're right.
So what's the bigger picture?
Preventing leptospirosis requires a comprehensive strategy that addresses multiple factors,
Like?
from individual behavior
Okay.
and environmental conditions
Okay.
to animal health.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
It's a complex challenge
It is.
that requires collaboration across different sectors, including healthcare, agriculture, and environmental management.
All those sectors need to work together.
This sounds like a classic example of the One Health approach
It is.
we often hear about,
We do.
where human, animal, and environmental health are all interconnected.
Precisely.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Recognizing those connections
Yeah.
is absolutely essential for effectively addressing zoonotic diseases like leptospirosis.
Right. Makes sense.
We need to think beyond traditional boundaries
I like that.
and adopt a more holistic perspective.
So we're not just treating the disease.
No.
We're treating the whole system.
Exactly
If we
so.
truly want to tackle this global health threat.
That's right.
It's fascinating how these seemingly separate domains are actually so intertwined.
They are.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something a little less scientific.
All right.
Communication.
Okay.
How do public health officials effectively communicate the risks of leptospirosis to communities, especially those most vulnerable to infection?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Communication is absolutely crucial.
it is.
You know, knowledge and awareness are the first lines of defense against any disease.
Right.
Public health campaigns often target specific groups,
Wait,
such as farmers,
okay.
who are at higher risk of exposure
Because they're working outside.
because of their occupations.
Right.
These campaigns might involve distributing educational materials,
Okay.
conducting workshops, or even using social media.
Social media, that's important these days.
It is,
Okay.
to spread the word.
So tailoring the message to the audience and meeting them where they are.
That's right.
But are there any unique challenges in communicating about leptospirosis, given that it's often misdiagnosed or misunderstood?
One of the biggest challenges is that leptospirosis is often underreported.
Underreported?
Yes. People aren't reporting it.
Oh, okay.
Which makes it difficult to accurately assess its true impact.
Yeah, you need the data.
You do.
Okay.
And communicate the risks effectively.
Right. If you don't know how big the problem is,
Exactly.
you can't really address it.
That's right.
Okay. Plus, in many communities, there's just a lack of awareness
There is.
about the disease itself,
Yeah.
its symptoms and how it spreads.
It's a knowledge gap.
So there's a lot of work to be done on the education front.
There is.
Are there any communication strategies
Yeah.
that have proven particularly effective in raising awareness and
Right.
encouraging people to take preventative measures?
Community-based approaches can be very powerful.
Community-based approaches.
Yeah.
Okay.
Imagine health workers partnering with local leaders and organizations
Okay.
to share information
Uh-huh.
and build trust.
Trust is important.
It is essential
Okay.
within those communities.
Right.
This can be especially effective in rural areas
Yeah.
where access to healthcare and information might be limited.
It's all about making those personal connections.
It is.
And using trusted sources to deliver the message.
Exactly.
But let's talk about another aspect of communication.
Okay.
Risk perception.
Risk perception. Okay.
How do people perceive the risk of leptospirosis? Well,
And how does that influence their behavior?
risk perception is influenced by a lot of different factors,
Right.
including personal experiences,
Yeah.
cultural beliefs,
Okay.
and even media coverage.
Yeah. How the media portrays it.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
some communities,
Yeah.
leptospirosis might be seen as a distant threat.
A distant threat.
Yeah,
It's
something that only affects people in other regions
Uh-huh.
or those who work in specific occupations.
So it's not seen as a personal threat.
That's right.
Okay.
This can lead to complacency
Right.
and a lack of preventive action.
So even if the information is out there, people might not act on it.
That's right.
If they don't see the risk as personally relevant,
Exactly.
how do you bridge that gap?
Well, and get people to take those risks seriously. It's all about making the information relatable
Relatable.
or
Wow.
sharing stories of people who have been affected
Okay.
by leptospirosis within their own community.
Yeah.
Can be a powerful way to capture attention. Right. It makes it real.
It does.
Okay.
And emphasize that it's not just a hypothetical threat.
It's something that could happen to them.
It's something that can happen right here, right now.
So connecting the dots between the science and people's everyday lives.
Exactly.
It's about making the invisible visible.
Yes. And it's about empowering individuals
Okay.
to take ownership of their health
Okay.
and make informed decisions.
Informed decision.
When people understand the risks
Uh-huh.
and how to protect themselves,
Yeah.
they are more likely to take action.
Makes sense.
It becomes a collaborative effort.
Okay.
Public health officials providing the information
Okay.
and individuals and communities taking steps to protect themselves.
It's a team effort.
It is.
But let's talk about the individuals who do become infected with leptospirosis.
Okay.
We've talked about initial symptoms and treatment options,
We have.
but what about the long-term effects?
That's a good question.
Can people fully recover?
Well,
Or are there lingering consequences?
most people
Yeah.
who receive prompt and appropriate treatment
Okay.
for leptospirosis make a full recovery.
That's good to hear.
But
Yeah.
for a small percentage of patients,
Yeah.
there could be lasting health issues.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is known as post-leptospirosis syndrome.
Post-leptospirosis syndrome.
Yes.
So even after the acute infection subsides,
Mm-hmm.
there can be lingering effects.
There can.
What are the hallmarks of this post-leptospirosis syndrome? What should people be aware of?
Well, it's characterized by persistent fatigue,
Okay.
muscle aches,
Uh-huh.
headaches,
Okay.
and difficulty concentrating.
Wow, that sounds awful.
These symptoms can last for months
Months.
or even years
Years.
after the initial infection,
Wow.
and they can have a significant impact
Yeah,
on a person's quality of life.
that sounds incredibly debilitating.
It can be.
Is there any treatment available?
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's no specific treatment for this.
And how do they manage it?
Management typically focuses on alleviating the symptoms and providing support to help patients cope.
Okay.
with the long-term effects.
So not a cure, but helping them manage.
That's right.
Okay.
It's an area where more research is definitely needed.
So a lot of unknowns.
Yeah,
And challenges surrounding post-leptospirosis syndrome.
there are.
It's a reminder that even diseases that are treatable can sometimes have lasting consequences.
They can.
It highlights the importance of ongoing research
It does.
to better understand the long-term effects of leptospirosis
Absolutely.
and to develop more effective strategies
Yep.
for managing and preventing this complex disease.
For sure.
Speaking of research, are there any areas of study that you find particularly exciting
There are.
when it comes to leptospirosis?
Yes.
What are they?
There's a lot of exciting work happening in the field of diagnostics.
Diagnostics.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Scientists are working on new rapid tests
Okay.
that can detect leptospirosis earlier and with greater accuracy,
That's great.
which could lead to more timely treatment
Right.
and better outcomes for patients.
That would be a game changer for sure.
It would.
What about on the vaccine front? Any breakthroughs there?
Vaccine development for leptospirosis is tricky
Why is that?
because there are so many different strains.
We talked about that earlier.
We did the serovirus.
It's the serovirus, right?
But researchers are actively working
Okay, that's good.
to develop vaccines that offer broader protection
That's what we need.
against multiple serovars.
So kind of like a universal vaccine.
Yeah, that would be a huge step forward
Yeah, weird.
in simplifying vaccination strategies
Okay.
and protecting more people.
Imagine a universal vaccine for leptospirosis.
That would be fantastic.
That would be incredible.
It would.
But for now, let's bring it back to the individual level.
Sure.
We've covered a lot about prevention.
Wham.
What are some key takeaways for you on how to stay safe and protect yourself and your loved ones from this disease?
Here's the bottom line.
Okay.
Be aware of your surroundings.
Okay.
If you live in or travel to an area where leptospirosis is common,
Okay.
take steps to avoid contact with potentially contaminated water,
Especially after rains.
especially after heavy rains or floods.
Okay.
Wear protective gear like boots and gloves
Right, huh?
when working outdoors,
Right.
particularly if you're handling soil or animal waste.
Good advice.
And finally,
yeah.
if you experience any symptoms,
Okay.
that could indicate leptospirosis.
Uh-huh.
Seek medical attention right away.
Right. Early intervention.
Early diagnosis and treatment are crucial
I see.
for preventing serious complications.
Excellent advice.
Thank you.
It's a good reminder that we all have a role to play
We do.
in protecting ourselves
Yeah.
and our communities from
Yeah.
this often overlooked
It is often overlooked.
but potentially dangerous disease.
It can be very dangerous.
But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to pose a question to you. We've discussed the link between leptospirosis and flooding,
Right.
but what about other environmental factors?
Interesting question.
Could things like deforestation or urbanization also contribute to the spread of this disease?
That's a great question,
Yeah.
and one that deserves further exploration.
Because.
Deforestation and urbanization
Yeah.
can significantly disrupt natural ecosystems,
Okay.
potentially leading to changes in rodent populations.
Right. Less habitat for them.
Exactly.
So they're going to be closer to where people live.
That's right.
Oh,
And how they interact with humans.
right.
And those changes could definitely have implications for leptospirosis transmission.
I can see that.
It's a complex ecological puzzle
It is.
that scientists are still working to understand.
It sounds like it.
But it highlights how interconnected
Yeah.
human health, animal health, and the environment truly are.
They really are. That's so true.
It is.
A perfect segue to our next segment.
Haha.
We'll be delving deeper
Awesome.
into the fascinating world of Leptospira itself.
Okay.
Its structure, life cycle, and the secrets it holds
Sounds good.
that scientists are still uncovering.
I can't wait.
Stay tuned.
Will do. Okay, so are we ready to go full-on CSI Leptospira?
Let's do it. You know, I always love looking at things under a microscope.
It's a fascinating organism.
Yeah.
We've talked about its spiral shape and those hooked ends,
Right, right.
which, might make it sound almost cute.
A little bit, yeah.
But beneath that seemingly harmless exterior lies a whole arsenal of survival tools.
So we're dealing with a microscopic ninja.
Basically,
Wow.
it's incredibly adaptable,
Yeah.
able to survive in a wide range of environments, from
Yeah.
soil and water
Okay.
to the kidneys of infected animals.
So it can live inside animals.
It can.
And remember those periplasmic flagella, those tiny
Okay.
outboard motors?
Yeah, they allow Leptospira to move
Mm-hmm.
with incredible speed and agility.
Right.
even in thick, viscous environments.
Oh, like mud.
Like mud, yeah.
Wow.
Picture them zipping through mud and water,
Okay.
dodging the immune system's defenses like a pro.
It's like a tiny microscopic action movie
It is.
playing out inside someone's body.
Exactly.
But how does this all translate to actual infection?
Okay, so think of it
Yeah,
as a stealthy mission,
I like that.
with Leptospira infiltrating the body
Uh-huh.
and setting up camp
Okay.
before the alarm bells even start ringing.
That's a good analogy.
It typically enters through cuts or abrasions in the skin
Right.
or through mucous membranes,
Mucous membranes.
like
Yeah.
the eyes, nose, or mouth.
So it's got to get in somehow.
It does.
Okay.
From there,
Yeah.
it hitches a ride in the bloodstream,
The bloodstream.
making its way to various organs,
Like,
especially the kidneys, liver, and lungs.
so it's a silent invasion, spreading throughout the body before the symptoms even appear.
That's a good way to put it.
That's pretty sneaky.
It is sneaky.
What happens once it reaches those target organs?
That's when the real damage begins.
Oh, no.
Leptospira releases toxins
Toxin.
that trigger inflammation
Okay.
and damage to the tissues.
So it's messing things up.
It is.
Think of it as a microscopic sabotage mission.
I like that.
In the kidneys,
Yeah.
it can interfere with filtration,
Yes.
leading to acute kidney injury.
That's right.
In the liver, it can cause jaundice
Ah.
and impair its ability to detoxify the blood.
Exactly.
And in the lungs, it can lead to bleeding and difficulty breathing.
That's right.
Wow, so it's a multi-organ attack
Mhm.
orchestrated by this tiny spiral-shaped bacteria.
It is a multifaceted attack.
But we've also talked about different Leptospira strains,
We have
the serovars.
the serovars, yes.
How do they factor into the equation? Do they all play the same role?
That's a crucial point. Different serovars can have different levels of virulence,
Virulence, meaning?
meaning how aggressive they are.
Okay.
Some are more likely to cause severe disease
Oh,
than others.
okay, so some are worse than others.
Exactly.
And they can have different targets, too?
They can.
Like
Some serovars are particularly good at invading the kidneys,
the kidneys?
while others might focus on the liver or lungs.
So it's like having different specialist teams.
Yeah, like a specialized army.
Within the Leptospira army.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's a complex interplay between the bacteria's genetic makeup
Right.
and the individual's susceptibility.
That's right.
But let's zoom out a bit
Okay.
and talk about the human element.
Okay.
How do people's behaviors and lifestyles influence their risk of encountering Leptospira?
Well, if you're frequently exposed
Yeah.
to environments where Leptospira is lurking,
Right.
your chances of running into it increase.
Makes sense.
People who work in certain occupations,
Okay.
like farming,
Right. Farming.
livestock handling,
Uh-huh.
or sanitation,
Right.
are at higher risk
Okay.
because they're more likely to come into contact with contaminated water or soil.
Right. They're working in those environments.
Exactly.
Similarly, recreational activities like swimming or kayaking in freshwater
Yeah,
can also pose a risk.
they can.
So knowing your risk factors is key.
It is.
But are there any specific actions people can take to minimize their chances of exposure
Absolutely.
besides avoiding mud puddles and rivers?
Well, yes.
Okay.
Protective gear is your friend.
Protective gear.
Things like boots and gloves can be lifesavers,
Especially for those high-risk occupations.
especially for those working in high-risk environments, yes.
Okay, and for everyone.
Good hygiene practices go a long way.
Like,
Washing your hands thoroughly,
uh-huh.
keeping any cuts or scrapes clean,
Makes sense.
can significantly reduce the risk of infection.
So don't make it easy for Leptospira to get in.
Exactly. Leptospira is looking for an entry point.
Right, right.
So don't make it easy for them.
Simple but effective advice.
It is.
But what about communities as a whole?
Mhm.
What can be done on a broader scale to prevent Leptospira from really taking hold?
That's where public health measures come into play.
Okay, like what?
Think big picture.
Okay,
Improving sanitation systems,
okay.
controlling rodent populations,
Right.
ensuring access to clean water,
All important stuff.
all crucial for minimizing the spread of the disease.
And during outbreaks.
During outbreaks, rapid response efforts are key.
Right?
Isolating infected individuals,
Uh-huh.
decontaminating water sources.
Okay.
It's about coordinating a defense on multiple fronts.
So it's not just one thing.
No.
It's a whole bunch of things working together.
Exactly.
So a multifaceted approach
Should be it.
involving individuals, communities, and public health systems.
That's right.
But let's zoom out even further. When we consider the global fight against leptospirosis, what are some of the long-term challenges?
One of the biggest challenges is raising awareness and understanding of the disease,
Okay.
especially in developing countries,
Right.
where it's most prevalent.
Okay.
Improving surveillance systems,
Right.
diagnostic capabilities,
Yeah.
and access to treatment.
Right.
Those are all crucial pieces of the puzzle.
It's a big puzzle.
It is.
And on a global scale,
Yeah.
we need to address the underlying factors
Absolutely.
that contribute to the spread of leptospirosis, like
Right.
poverty, inadequate sanitation, and even climate change.
All of those things play a role.
It's not just about fighting the bacteria itself.
Right.
It's about addressing the broader social and environmental factors
It is.
that allow it to thrive.
Exactly. It's a complex web of interconnected issues.
It sounds like it.
But amidst those challenges,
Yeah.
there's also reason for optimism.
Oh, good.
Scientists are making progress
That's good to hear.
in developing new vaccines and diagnostic tools.
Okay.
And there's growing recognition of the One Health approach.
We talked about that earlier.
We did.
Okay.
Which emphasizes the interconnectedness
Yeah.
of human, animal, and environmental health.
Right. It's all connected.
This holistic perspective is essential
Okay.
for effectively tackling zoonotic diseases.
Like leptospirosis.
Like leptospirosis, yeah.
It sounds like a long road ahead,
It is.
but with a focus on research, collaboration, and understanding this complex interplay, we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And that's a message worth spreading.
It is.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of leptospirosis,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways you hope listeners will remember?
Okay, here's what I want you to take away.
Okay.
Leptospirosis is a serious, yet often overlooked disease
Right.
with global reach.
Right.
It's more common than you might think,
It is.
and it can have serious consequences
Yeah.
if not treated promptly.
Right.
But the good news is
Good news.
there are things you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones.
That's good.
Be aware of your surroundings,
All right.
practice good hygiene, and seek medical attention
Right.
if you experience any symptoms.
Early intervention is key.